Our career chat guest for this evening, Khristi Adams, or Reverend Khristi Adams. She is a speaker, an author, a youth advocate, an ordained Baptist minister, and so much more. Khristi is an author of Parables of a Brown Girl, which is published by Fortress Press. The book highlights the cultural and spiritual truths that emerge from the lives of young Black girls. Parable of a Brown Girl has received awards for Best Young Adult Book from the African American Literary Awards and the New York Black Librarians Caucus. Her second book, Unbossed, How Black Girls Are Leading the Way, profiles 8 rising entrepreneurs, visionaries, and activists who are working toward a better future. She works as Dean of Spiritual Life and Equity at the Hill School. Khristi is also an instructor of religious studies at Hill School. She's the founder and director of the Becoming Conference, which we're super excited to learn a little more about. It's an annual conference and leadership cohort designed to empower, educate, and inspire girls between the ages of 13 and 18. As a graduate of Temple University with a degree in advertising and a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary, where she obtained her Master's of Divinity degree, please let's welcome our guest for this evening, the esteemed Khristi Adams. Thank you so much for being here with us today. You have a pretty textured career background, which I think is so important. It gives us a little bit of background on your story and your journey, right? Because there are a few different things that you find in your area of focus. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are and maybe some of the aha moments that Oprah likes to call them, or the breadcrumbs, the little inklings, the things that kind of help you know that you were in the right direction or walking toward the path that seemed to be best for you?
Yeah, I kind of fumbled my way through my career. I think most people do and don't like to admit that. I think a lot of, we're in a safe space where we can just like talk normal to each other. You know, I think my resume and my career is just seasons of me just trying to figure it out. And that's just the reality of it. That's what I learned from these girls that I wrote about in the book. That's what I learned from my young people that I work with every day, you know, that we evolve. I'm going to skip a little bit. There's one girl in the book that I write about that I did an Instagram Live about, and she started this organization called Gen Z, We Want to Live. And she's doing all these marches, and I mean, she's dynamic. And so I didn't talk to her for real in like 2 years since I first interviewed her. And she's like, yeah, I'm on the wrestling now, you know. And I'm like, okay, cool, you know. So I follow her Twitter, and she's just everything's about wrestling. She's got a wrestling podcast. I mean, everything. She was like, I will always be a young Black woman doing racial justice work. It's just gonna intersect with the wrestling that I really like to do now. And then maybe in a few years I'll run for Senate. I was like, okay. But I love that because that sums up just how life is. Some of us get it in a one and done, you know, this is what I want to do. Throw the rock at, you know, throw the rock and, you know, you hit the target. But that's not always going to be the case. The rest of it is you just learning yourself and then trying to figure out the rest. And so for me, that's really what my path has been. It started off really as me pouring back into, or really living a life that was a reflection of the people that poured into my life. So growing up in the Black church, growing up with a really affirming, you know, pastor, you know, with youth mentors and peers that were dynamic leaders, you know, it was inevitable that I was going to go in this path, it seemed like, because they just had such an effect on my life. So whether I worked with young people in ministry or residential treatment facilities or, you know, after school programs or whatever, that was what it was going to be. But, you know, whether it was ministry or I moved to LA for a little bit and I did some campus ministry out there, but I was also like doing some short film documentaries out there. You know, somebody had to remind me of that the other day. They're like, I saw your film on YouTube. And I was like, what film? And then it was like, oh, that's right. For like 2 years, I was all into filmmaking. And for like 7 years, I was into playwriting and directing. I was all into theater. You know, if anybody is familiar with New Jersey, I had a show at Crossroads Theater, which was like a big deal, you know. And then, it just, people were like, oh, when did you know you want to be an author? I was like, 2016, like I didn't wake up and say, oh, I want to be an author. It just was, it's the season of life that I'm in right now. And that's just how life is. So I don't know if I had aha moments. I think the only aha moment that I had was I was teaching vacation Bible school to a group of Black girls. And I was leading them in an exercise on like their purpose, and like discovering their purpose, etc. And there was a worksheet that I had them do, and I did it with them. And we were finding these like consistent themes in our life. And this is before I wrote Parable of the Brown Girl, anything. And the consistent theme was Black girls. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is literally, doesn't matter where I've been, that is a part of my calling, working with empowering young Black women. So that's going to be sort of like what Jay Shell said, I'm going to do that regardless, whether that's in wrestling or playwriting or whatever. That is what I feel like is my calling. Now, where that shows up, if it's books, that may come and go, who knows? So I'm just trying to figure life out just like everybody else.